And we're live. Hi, everybody. My name is Pasha. Welcome to the Agency Operators Podcast. Today, I'm joined by special guest, Brian R. Johnson. I'm a big fan of you. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It is an honor. I was looking forward to this call. So appreciate you having me on, Pasha. Thank you.
Thank you, man. You're one of the inspirations actually for me starting this thing. And we were having a chat before I launched episode 1. And you're like, make sure, this and that. And, you're giving me some pointers. And here we are, episode 18. So I'm really thankful for you. I've actually been following you since Sponsored Product Academy days.
Okay. Very good.
That's around the time when I was launching my agency. And I'm like, I need some strategy, put some SOPs together. Like, where do I get that? And there it was. Yeah. And then I saw at some point that it was third one was coming out or fourth one, and then it was closed. And there was a lot going on during that time, right?
Yeah, the first one came out probably 8 years ago. So which was a couple years after I had started in the Amazon space, as far as company software, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah, PPC Scope, right? And that was
PPC Scope. Yeah, it was 2014, 15, something like that.
Yeah, those are early days of PPC software. I mean, it's gone pretty far now, which we'll get to that, how it's evolved now into the DeepM thing. But before diving into DeepM and AI, because everyone loves to talk about that, that's obviously the passion at the moment for yourself, myself, and many others.
Sure.
But I want to talk about Canopy, right?
Yeah.
Because that's another, you launched Canopy around the time that I launched my agency. And I was very impressed how well put together you guys were from the get-go. It wasn't just let's try to do the agency thing. You guys were really on it from day one. So could you talk a little bit about how you formed Canopy and kind of how that progressed through the years and your role there? Did it change a lot, or you kind of did the same thing until you just did something else?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely we came in at opposite. We approached the opposite that normal agencies are founded. Usually, there is a certain amount of expertise that somebody has, and they start an agency in order to help others, and then they do things like develop training and develop software. We did the exact opposite. I created software first. And then that led into my connections so I could form the partnerships for our training academy, which is, Sponsored Products Academy. And then that eventually got to the point where we had enough brands that were saying, it's I don't really want to learn all this, because we were up to, it was a 6-week video training course with calls and homework and all this kind of stuff. And there's plenty of brands, I've on one side, I've created a lot of competitors, which I'm okay with now at this point. It's the more the merrier, but probably a good business sense would not to have been to divulge all the intellectual property and that kind of stuff. But ultimately we had a number of brands that just kept coming and saying, hey, can you just, clearly you guys know what you're doing. You can you just do it for us? And so then that's how we started Canopy Management. And we started Canopy Management back in 2018. Fun fact, I retired from Canopy 2 months ago. But in order to focus my attention on DeepM, which you had kind of hinted at. But from an agency standpoint I'm glad to hear that you think that it's like we were really on top of everything, and we were, things just kind of, perception is executed flawlessly, because we made some horrific mistakes. First year of any startup is going to be embarrassing. It's going to be painful, and you just have to learn from it. And this is my 5th startup now in Canopy was my 4th, DeepM is my 5th startup in the Amazon space. And with each startup, I take what I learned from previous pain, and I try to avoid that pain in the future. Am I successful? No, I still make mistakes. And, frankly, I had heard this statement. Somebody had made the quote, they were talking about SaaS software, but really it applies to any startup. Is if you are not embarrassed by the first iteration that you launch out into the public, the first version that you put out there, if you're not embarrassed by it, you went to market too late.
Mm.
In other words, you're not innovating fast enough. You're not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
You're not making enough mistakes in order to warrant you to be big and successful at some point. So do not go in quietly. Be noisy as you can get, you know, and just make mistakes and learn from it, you know.
So a
Because
little
that's
bit
the
of
best way you're going to
chaos.
fix those.
Yeah. You have to have a little bit of chaos when you're doing something like that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And,
When you
and
go to
honestly,
market too late, it's you can't have everything just perfectly ironed out. Just
yeah, you're just copying somebody else at that point.
yeah.
You know, and we were not the first agency in the Amazon advertising space by any stretch. First software, first course, sure. Agency, we were, you know, we did it in reverse. We came in and there was, you know, a dozen other agencies that were out there, but my business partner, he was very aggressive when it came to marketing. And he was constantly putting us out there. Every single week, we were putting out some kind of live content, webinar, posts. We were making silly videos. We were trying to get creative. We were trying to make co-marketing partnerships with others. We did everything except for create a podcast, which is what we should, frankly, have done in the first place, is create the podcast back when we had you know, when the podcast didn't exist in that particular niche.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the reason I didn't do that, and I regret it, is because I didn't think I had enough material. It turns out I had plenty of material. I just didn't think it, you know, I just didn't evaluate it high enough in my head. But yeah, so kind of, you know, there's a lot of things that occurred, you know, in creating the agency. And honestly, we almost didn't make it out of the first year. We almost crashed and burned, and I can get into more of that. But the way that the agency stands today is, you know, it's 180, 200, you know, clients across the world in the Amazon and Walmart space. You know, 90 to 100 employees. That, I mean, it always changes based on contractors and all that kind of stuff. You know, and Inc. 500, Inc. 5000 3 years in a row, Inc. 500 2 of those 3 years. So we skipped one 3 years ago, and then this year. So yeah, I mean, there's some cool things to say. It's like, wow, you know, we finally, you know, we built it, but I don't want anybody to think that it was easy, because frankly, there was, you know, I remember a time where I was so frustrated coming home from the office that I was just yelling at the top of my lungs at myself in frustration. And the next day I didn't have a voice.
Oh man.
Because it was just like that much like, oh, like, why can't we get this, you know, right? Because, you know, we'd get in, you know, we'd land, you know, a whale of a client and then completely blow it because we didn't have the number one mistake. We didn't have the SOPs in place. We didn't have the processes in place that guaranteed consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And that will absolutely, that makes or breaks every single company. That's one of the reasons why I focus on it so much now. And each of my successive startups is the part that I failed at the most, I have to make sure gets done as soon as possible in each startup. Otherwise, I'm going to guarantee I just repeat, you know, failures that I've had in the past.
Okay. So you would say that at the end of that first year, that was the biggest pain point. Like it was the fact that things were kind of growing, but not really well put together. And then at some point you landed that big client and it was just too chaotic, right? And
the first 6 or 7 months was painful because we landed multiple. So let's put it this way. The first 10 big clients that we landed, our strategy was correct. You know, it wasn't like we were trying, you know, we were selling smoke or something like that. We knew what we were doing, but we didn't have the systems in place and the quality controls in place. We didn't have the processes in place in order to make sure that the same experience that client 1 had, that client 2, client 3, client 4 had, right? There was consistency. That there was a tempo, there was a cadence where we communicated every single week, where something was done every single day, where, we'd have one client that you'd have 4 people working on that account every single day. And another client just as big didn't touch their account for 2 weeks, simply just because we lacked the training, the process, the accountability. And that ultimately, of course, we blew them out. And they said, look, like, you're way too expensive for what you're delivering. So I'm out. It's like, okay, it sucks, but we get it. It's like, I understand. At no point were we ever trying to defraud anybody.
Right.
We simply just didn't have our act together. We didn't have our systems together. And I put it fully on myself, is that my partner signed up to be chief marketing officer. I signed up to be chief operating officer. And guess what? I am not a chief operating officer. I am a product officer. I'm an innovator. And there's a lot of things about conversion rate and marketing that I absolutely love and I have a passion for. But my superpowers, as I've learned through pain, is I am not an operator. I am an idea guy. I'm an innovator, and I'm a product development. That's my superpowers in product development.
But in order to get a
running
product,
the day-to-day operations.
yeah,
No.
yeah.
So I had to replace myself at my own expense, out of my own pocket. I had to replace myself, and we had to bring in somebody who was superior at operations, and that completely turned things around.
I can relate to that. Yeah. I mean, at some point you have to wear the hats, right? But if you have the ability to replace yourself, then that's probably ideal. It's so awesome to see somebody come into the company to replace you and doing a better job than you. It's like, oh, I can breathe and do the things that make me smile more.
Yeah, it's humbling, but it's the correct move for the success for the survival of an agency, the survival of any company. You have got to come to terms with your own strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes that's just through fire, through pain, and that's what it is. And so, we can never just walk in, just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to put on the entrepreneur name tag and therefore things will just work because I've got a great idea. Everybody's got an idea. Everybody's got this brilliant, some brilliant find that they discover that is different than what everybody else has found. But if you can't execute and create a process around, these days, you don't even necessarily have to build a team around you because of technology advances, but you still have to have the processes to make sure that everything gets done so that the perception of your customer is, this is a rewarding and worthwhile experience. Otherwise, don't be in that business, or find somebody who can execute where you cannot, which is really, the latter is certainly where it should be, is find somebody, that can do what you do, a lot better than you, frankly.
Yeah, sometimes it's very hard, right? It's like you set the standard, so it's like
but sometimes it's just ego. Like I could claim, I could pat myself on the back and say, like, I'm the number one expert in this space, but I couldn't run somebody else's account to save my life. Couldn't execute on that. I know the strategy. I know how to solve the rarest of problems when it comes to Amazon advertising. Now, Amazon advertising is not my highest skill set now. There's people who've surpassed me in the community, and frankly, I've moved on to other things. But you got to check your ego and just say, look, just because I founded this company, just because I think I understand the customer better, because I understand, I'm the subject matter expert, whatever, you got to get it off of you as quickly as possible. Delegate and just say, you know what? I don't expect anybody to do what I do, but I'll bet I can find somebody who can do 80% of what I do. And I only need to spend 20% doing quality control. It's a way better use of that expert's time is to simply just audit and do quality control on somebody else's activities that does the 80% of the job than for that subject matter expert to try to do everything themselves. It's a fool who does that, because they're doing $20 tasks when they should be doing $1,000 tasks.
Yeah, they're devaluing themselves.
Yeah, they'll kill their own company. And
Yeah.
and then let's say it's like, oh, I always wanted to have a small company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're a micromanager.
Yeah. SOPs. Let's talk
Mhm.
about that real quick, because it's obviously super important. But I hear that term being thrown around a lot, and when I hear SOPs, I think of a number of different things. Sometimes it's a Google sheet,
Yeah.
and then you say, okay, do people really open up that Google sheet and follow it to a T? And then what happens if they don't? And like, you have to micromanage the people to make sure that they follow the SOP. So you have to have checks in order to make sure that the SOP is being executed. So whether it is in Asana or one of these types of project management tools or a Word document, what is the best way to actually implement an SOP that people want to follow, that they actually find relief from, versus, oh, this is this tedious, like, I got to follow everything like exactly.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of ways you can look at that. That's definitely probably the smarter way to go, is to improve the SOP so that they want to use it. I don't know how feasible that is, but I like the idea. I think it's more of a case of, there's the old adage, of trust but verify. It's too often that we get overwhelmed as entrepreneurs, as founders, and we finally hand something off, and we let go of it completely, and just hope that that person runs with it with a passion and self-protection interest that you would apply to that. And oftentimes it's not going to happen. It's going to be just like, the 80% that I was talking about. You can find somebody who's going to execute 80%. Don't expect anybody, except for maybe your co-founder, and then maybe, to do better than 80%, which means you can't just let it go and cross your fingers and hope, because you're busy doing other things and making the excuses like, well, I don't have time because I have to do all these other things. Well, then your schedule is broken. Your priorities are broken. You've got to come up with some way that, first of all, you've got an SOP, and now you've got to enforce some kind of audit or some kind of checks and balance that says, is there, did you do the job? And sometimes it's not practical to go in and say, well, look, I don't have time to audit every single line item that this person did in their tasks. Okay. But what are the 2 or 3 key metrics that you can get reported back to you that give you an early warning system that something is right or something is wrong? Because you should be able to, without going into every single task and line item and check every single thing and say, is that how I would have done it? No, I would have done it differently. Oh, I need to create a video and train them. It's like, I don't have time, and excuse is you need to identify what are the 2 or 3 metrics that I need to see, so that in one glance, I know if it's working or not. If it's working, I don't touch it. If something's off, if something's not working and the metrics are off, that's a red flag for me to go in and audit further.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to commit 100% of your time to be a babysitter, to be a micromanager. You've got to identify what are the signals, not to trust an individual person, but what are the signals coming back to me that I can trust, that tells me, do I need to focus, or can I do something else? Like, do I need to put attention on this, or can I do the other stuff that's overwhelming me?
And then once you've done that, what's the next step, right? Like, you detect that something is off. One of the KPIs doesn't check. You're saying, okay, something's off here. How much slack do you cut somebody before you, like, it? Sometimes it's, do I have to retrain this person? Sometimes it's, this person just isn't a good fit. Or like, how do you address the situation? Is it just kind of case by case, depending on the severity of the issue?
That's a great question, because the tendency of a founder is to, I want you to do things the way that I would do it.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It just means that's the founder's ego getting in the way. An example where I had that is we brought in a director of operations, and they essentially took all the ad management strategies that I had created for the team, and they had built out processes and checks and balances and all this kind of stuff. And every once in a while, they'd pull me in order to audit further or to help the team troubleshoot something. I'd go in, it's like, wait, like, okay, you did like 50% of what I say you can do. How come you're not doing the other 50%? How come you didn't do this and this and this and this and this? These are all advanced strategies. The response I got was humbling, because it says like, yes, your strategies are great. We employ those when there's an advanced need to put those in place. But it's these 50% of your strategies that creates the core of our service, that we can maintain our margins and efficiency, and so everybody gets the same quality of service. If we're constantly going into that second 50%, then there creates an imbalance. Our profit margins go way down, and so it's like, oh, yes, okay, understood. And so they almost like they save, like, here's the advanced 50% of strategies. We save those for special situations where we really need to pull all the stops. We're really trying to solve something specific. So first of all, from you may have here's my 20 item checklist that I expect you to do, and they consistently only do 15 of them, let's say. They may have a good reason why they're only doing 15. Never assume that it's somebody who is lazy or not intelligent or something like that. Chances are they're not seeing the results from doing the whole thing, or they don't have time to do the whole thing, in which that begs things like automation, right? In rare cases, do they actually need better training? They need better systems themselves, better ways to troubleshoot their own work. That's kind of like, the same 2 or 3 metrics that a founder or a team executive or team leader might look at to know if there's a problem or not. Why not? Why doesn't each person have that themselves, so that they can say, I'm looking at my accounts that I manage, and like the metrics are off on this one. I need to raise my hand and call for help. That's something that Canopy that we did really well is we create ad teams of 6 or 7 people, like 6 people plus a manager. Various levels. We have juniors, we'd have standard specialists, and then we'd have maybe 1 senior specialist per team plus the team manager. And what that did is it allowed, they would meet regularly in order to collaborate on hey, you know what? I've got this problem. My metric is off. What am I missing here? How do I fix it? And the team would get together and say oh, what about this? What about that? The team would then help, right? And that's if you've got a team, right? An individual person, let's say you've got only one person on that team, there should still be some indicators, some metrics that they can look at to know, am I doing my job well enough or not? I still may not be doing the entire checklist. I may not be doing it out of sequence. I may be making mistakes, but if the metrics are right for the success of the account and therefore the success of the company, I can judge whether I'm doing it correctly or incorrectly. My management and founders can see that from a high level. And if there is kind of a question of what the person's intention is, or if there's some confusion or whatever, have that person walk through the process with the manager, leader, founder, and say, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. Oftentimes that manager, leader, founder will learn something that they didn't even realize existed. Oh, I wrote that incorrectly, or I didn't think about that, or there's usually a learning opportunity there. It's not just, hey, go do your job or you're fired. That's a weak manager. That's a weak leader who opts for that to say you're out the door because you're not doing your job. Really? Or was it because you failed to put in the systems and the metrics in order for them to be successful at their job?
Very true.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's the stuff I've had to learn too, So this was not natural for me. It was all like, ow, I bled. Therefore, I'm going to learn how not to bleed in the future.
That's it. Pain is data.
Yeah.
Right?
Pain, absolutely. Yeah. It's the greatest teacher is to make mistakes.
That's why we have it. That's faculty of life. What can you do? Just ride the wave. Let's talk about DeepM.
Okay.
Because that's exciting. And we spoke a little bit about that. I'm not going to say anything yet, but share what you want to share about that. It's pretty advanced.
So
you guys are doing a lot of data being calculated, and
So DeepM is my latest company. Been co-founded it with my partner over in Israel probably about 20 months ago now. And we've been working on the technology for a long time. It does use machine learning on the back end, but it was all machine learning. We don't use like the language models. We're not using ChatGPT. It's not like a spin-off of one of those technologies, which I don't have a problem with those. It's just we were using more traditional machine language in order to analyze big data. And when I say big data, what we do is we're essentially it's a software company that provides ranking and competitive intelligence in the Amazon space. And so what we can do is we look at an entire product niche. So most tools, look like, oh, here's the top 10, top 20 products. Here's, the top, 50 search terms. Here's what people are selling. Here's the basic metrics. Here's their product rating, all that kind of stuff. We went in and our objective was to collect so much data. And right now we're up we analyze for a single product niche, we analyze about 20 to 30 million data points in order to get some statistical accuracy in what we predict. And what we can do is because we're analyzing so much data in so many different ways, we have mostly, I don't want to ever say, we've solved it. That's a bit arrogant to say, but we've reverse engineered most of how Amazon's A9 algorithm sorts products in search results. And there's a number of what are known as frontier questions. It's like, how does A9 choose, which product to rank against something else? Does the target search term need to be in the title, or can it be in bullet points or A+ content? Does price matter? Does conversion rate matter? All these things, right? External traffic, whatnot. And we were able to we've currently identified about 30 different ranking factors of the A9 measures and weights. In other words, adjusts or emphasizes between categories, between subcategories. So an example on that is, the title relevance, for instance, is commonly important, right? There's a lot more to unpack when it comes to just title relevance. That's a very generalized phrase for a lot more data science that goes into that. A lot of people would say it's like, price is a ranking factor. It's not actually. In most subcategories, A9 doesn't seem to care about price by itself. Oftentimes they'll care more about whether or not you're doing a temporary promotion now and then, which is interesting to watch, is to see where the products that periodically run coupon discounts and then turn it off for a while, run a lightning deal and then turn it off for a while. Just kind of every once in a while, spiking the algorithm, spiking the sales unit sales velocity has a bigger benefit in a lot of categories than things like ratings or price.
Well, a lot of that is just factored into conversion rate, so it
Yes,
doesn't really
that is
need
absolutely
to be
true.
Yeah.
And we can the data is there in order to do some general comparative metrics when it comes to conversion rate, for instance. In other words, I could say it's like, well, this product on this specific search term has this average conversion rate, and then compare that to the entire rest of that product niche and what the 50th percentile, what the typical conversion rate is. And you can generally say like, well, if I look at things like search query performance in that specific example, then I know that I can learn from the fact it's like, okay, I'm trying to go after 200 search terms, but really there's only 40 of these that I actually beat the rest of the category on when it comes to conversion rate. If you see that, focus on those 40. Focus on the ones where you have a conversion rate competitive advantage, because I would say that is probably the number one factor when it comes to A9. Now, when I say number one, I used to think it's like, well, yeah, unit sales velocity and conversion rate. Those are the two things. That's 50% and 50%, right? Now it's more like 20% and 15% and declining percentage from there on. In other words, there's a lot more ranking factors that go into the sorting of products. There's not one magic bullet that you need to go after. And it varies from subcategory to subcategory. It is different in sequence, different weight that they have. And so there's, like I said, there's 30 different ranking factors we found so far. And there's some common players that we see among most subcategories, but ultimately what that does is it helps us by itself. It's like, okay, that's interesting, but how do I use that? We use it in a way, is it because we look at each of those ranking factors, we also look to see, okay, let's scorecard everybody for that ranking factor and how well they did that particular ranking factor. And let's say, as an example, their title is optimized, right? Very general statement there. Their title is optimized. We'll actually pin that down to a score of like saying, okay, your title and your product has a 51% optimization rate, and you have competitors. You've got in your top 20 competitors, let's say, we've narrowed down. Now, granted, we look at all 300 competitors, but then we narrow it down to the top 20 that are most a threat or most opportunity. And we might say it's like, well, you've got a 51% optimization on your title. You have a competitor who has a 55%. So they're beating you on title optimization. The rest of your competitors are like 50, 49, 32, 18, whatever. And so you'll know, like, not only is, a lot of times a common advice is, oh, you need to optimize your product listing. What does that actually mean, right? We break it down to something that's numerical to say like, okay, not only do we know what score that we would come up with for your title, but we know what everybody else is. So we know what your relative position is to your competition and whether or not your title is beating your competitor titles for the search terms that you're going after, you're trying to target. And so what that then allows us to do is to not only see the gaps in the marketplace as far as where the weaknesses are among competition, know that we can or cannot exploit that for certain search terms, and we can identify which search terms fit your products in your catalog and which ones are actually going to beat, and what you need to change about the product listing and your promotion, your advertising, in order to beat your competition. And the end result is a search result, and that is maybe you were in position 18, ranked position 18 for this competitive search term. Now you're in position 5 or 3 or 1. We know how to get there. We know how to get you into position number 1. Now, we don't do it for you. We simply just provide you the intelligence so that you can make the changes yourself. And then we keep watching the competition so that if some competitor comes in and uses ChatGPT someday and like redesigns their title, we see it. And we see whether or not they score better or they score worse. We can see when they're split testing in Amazon Experiments, they're doing an A/B split test on their title, and we can tell you which title that they settled in on, ideally the one that has the higher conversion rate. We know that. We can see it. So we're constantly monitoring the competition, and we can tell you from week to week exactly what to tweak to get ahead and to stay ahead and to take over market share. So that's what I've covered so far are just the 3 or 4 big rocks that we've solved. Pretty much every other week we find yet one more thing. Like it's getting kind of ridiculous now. It's like okay, we need to pin some of these things down, as far as like, okay, how do you get bestseller badge? I can tell you exactly how to beat your competition. It's not just unit sales velocity. It's more complex than that, but I can tell you exactly what you need to do. So it's to say, as for a nerd like me who likes this kind of product development and research and has the background to understand conversion rates and listing optimization and advertising and the whole platform, I am in heaven, because I get to play on a regular basis. Now, I'm also acting as the chief product officer, which means I interface with our beta users. We're in beta testing still. I'm interacting with our beta users, and frankly, there's a lot of pain that comes around with it.
Yeah.
Because are the SOPs in place? Are you able to report? Are you able to tell people what you know from the data? Are you able to articulate that in a way that they can understand? And guess what? No, we screwed it up, and we did a pretty bit just recently. In fact, we screwed it up where we couldn't report correctly because we were trying to solve that. We didn't have that solved ahead of time. Remember the statement, like, if you're not embarrassed by your first iteration, you went to market too late. Guess what? I was embarrassed, because we didn't have the reporting put together to tell them what we already knew, that it was working. And we finally solved that. And now we're just trying to get the reporting out to everybody in this first iteration. But once again, I'm not afraid to screw up and to admit that, you know what, I messed up because I didn't see this coming. Now, some of the stuff, there's no way I would have seen it coming, but it's still on me. It's still my responsibility to own up to it, to take action, to hustle, to get it done. The fact that we keep on coming up with new technology and discovering new things about the algorithm and the way that advertising plays and some of the secondary benefits to other product families and that kind of stuff, like all these things, they're a lot of fun, but we still have to get our house in order over on this side so that we can play over here in the sandbox, and develop things that nobody else has put out there on the market. Now, it's not to say that somebody doesn't have it hidden, because that's something that we have debated also is, do we make this public as a SaaS, or do we keep it to ourselves and apply it privately to our own brands or to friends of friends kind of brand and just keep it under wraps? We haven't decided on that. But I look forward to waking up every day, and I'm having a whole lot of fun, even with the pain, even with the struggles. Yeah, I'm loving it. I really am.
Amazing. I love how the progression worked, right? You learn so many things from all these different projects. Like you said, this is your 5th startup. Yeah. And now you know exactly what you love to do. And you said, I'm going to build an entire project around exactly the thing that I'm the best at. And that's why,
it's one of those examples of like, it took me 17 years to become an overnight success. I haven't become an overnight success on this project, but I know it's coming.
Yeah,
absolutely. I know that each company that I've built in the Amazon space has been progressively larger. It's the 4-figure, 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure. I guess now I'm working toward the 9-figure at this point.
Awesome.
We'll see.
I mean, we know it's coming. You got the data trend, right? You got the you got the chart to prove it. So, chances are. But I do have a quick couple questions. As you were talking about DeepM. Well, first of all, is the reporting going out like consistently every day? Like, every week, every
No,
month.
no. In fact, there's we were just having that discussion yesterday morning as far as like, in order for us to go. So we're right now what we call beta 1 internally. That's our own naming convention, beta 1. In order for us to reach beta 2, we have to have consistent reporting, because we've got weekly, monthly. We have one-off, weekly, monthly, and then quarterly reporting. And so, in order for me to be satisfied that we can graduate to our own internal benchmark of our beta 2, is we have to get consistency in the automation and delivery of those reports on a weekly and monthly basis for us to move forward and to take on the new discoveries that we have and going into those further. We're building more and more of these frontier questions. These are the frontier questions, or are you familiar with what a frontier question is?
Not quite.
To put it kind of an example of, like, if you talk to like real scientists, like, like astrophysicists and, this kind of stuff. And they say, it's like, well, nobody's been able to, we theorize that the universe is expanding or shrinking, but nobody's been able to prove it. That's a frontier question, something that is theorized, but has not been proven with data. And then of course, through peer review has been proven. And so those are the frontier questions. Those are the ones that are like, these are really hard questions that a lot of people are trying to solve. And so we're creating our own list of frontier questions. An example in this space would be like, do brand ads actually increase the search rank of a product for a search term? Do sponsored brand ads? We can speculate all day long, but I haven't seen anybody, including myself, who's proven it. But I'm close. I actually have the data that I could do it. But I have a whole list of these frontier questions, and I keep on adding to them as we make new discoveries. And I love collaborating with other people in the space that, who are also researchers of A9 and algorithms and these kind of things, because it's, we can't operate in a vacuum, because there's a lot of academic kind of research that occurs. And so I welcome those kind of opportunities to collaborate. We've even formed groups on WhatsApp just to, geek out on like, why does Amazon do this in this situation, but some other situation they don't? And Amazon is our first version. We're US marketplace, Amazon. We're going to go to other marketplaces in Amazon. The baseline, the technology, the AI model that we developed applies to any shopping marketplace. Mm-hmm. Eventually we'll go to Walmart and Temu and TikTok Shop and Mercado Libre, and whatever, all these other platforms, because the same kind of big data collection and analysis, it's capable to go cross channel. So those are things I'm also looking forward to, but that's probably, 3, 4, or 5 years out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Amazon is global. All those other marketplaces,
yeah, there's plenty to do in the Amazon space.
Yeah, a lot. There's a lot to cover. It's kind of amazing, right? It's just that one platform, and it's like people can have, like ourselves, entire industries are created, entire careers are created just off that one company's doing. So that's pretty massive. One more question before we go. Curious how PPC has an influence on these factors. So obviously you're turning the listing content into an empirical value, which I love that. Yeah. Because it's not just like this listing is better than this one because like the yellow is nicer. It's like, no, there's data here, and we can compare the data of multiple different things. But then PPC, and that obviously is your forte. It affects rank quite a bit, and there's so many different ways that you can kind of go about it. And sometimes PPC is not even needed in certain cases. Like if there's already a lot of organic pull, then PPC just actually kind of drowns your conversion rate a little bit. So you might not agree on that point, but
no. I mean, I agree with it. The funny thing is that there's a lot of statements that I've made over the years that I kind of have to retract now, because now I have the data to say, like, you know what, I was right on this and I was wrong on this other thing, or something has changed in that I used to be right and now I'm wrong, that kind of thing. And like I said, I don't have a problem saying, like, okay, I was a fool, or I didn't understand it well enough, or I just flat out, I theorized and I missed,
So you guys are given suggestions on the PPC side?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Here's a couple of things that I will say on that when it comes to PPC. PPC and PPC has become known in the industry as, like, okay, it's a pay to play system, with Amazon advertising, you just have to do it. You have no choice. No, that's not true. However, unit sales velocity, the number of units that you're moving per day, does weigh. It's consistently top 6, I would say. Top 6 as far as ranking factors across most subcategories on Amazon. Again, it changes from one subcategory to another. The profile changes from one to the next. We didn't expect that, but yeah, it actually does change. But you figure PPC is a method of increasing unit sales velocity. It increases visibility, that if you have an attractive offer, you're going to get the consumer click through, right? So your click-through rate is high enough. And if you have an attractive offer with enough social proof and other elements like that, that don't distract the shopper, then ultimately you can convert to a sale. And so traffic equals engagement equals purchase. Ideally, it's a clean linear thing. And it's never that clean, never that linear. But PPC is best used to increase from a ranking standpoint, from a search ranking standpoint. It's best used to increase the unit sales velocity. Now, in a lot of subcategories, unit sales velocity may be a top 3 or 4 ranking factor, and therefore it probably has a 15 to 20% weight on how Amazon ranks the products in that particular subcategory. And so if you increase the unit sales velocity through PPC, then it may be enough in order to do better than what your competition is doing. And I love that you've got family in the back, I'm assuming. So I love that. I've got, I'm at home. I got family too, and they come and go, as they please. I think it's awesome we can do that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, so PPC is going to influence unit sales velocity. Unit sales velocity may have a 15, 20% impact on actual search ranking. That's one of the reasons, but it's not everything, because let me kind of point that in a different direction. If you're not using PPC, you might be using something like an influencer or some kind of a giveaway or rebate type of thing in order to move units off Amazon, right? And in the traditional day, or past days, there was plenty of services that says, we'll give away 100 units. We'll spike the unit sales velocity. You'll shoot up onto page 1, top of page 1 for search rank, and then we'll back off and you'll magically just stay there. And 20% of the time that actually worked, because in those particular subcategories, it was enough to beat the competition in the ranking factor. But the reality is that 80% of the time, arbitrary number, 80% of the time, those products fall right back off of page 1 search rank. And the reason is because they were temporarily strong on one ranking factor that had a 15 to 20% weight for their subcategory, but they are weak on the other 75, 80% of ranking factors. And so they got put down exactly where they belong, because they didn't do what they needed to do to optimize against their competition for all the other ranking factors that mattered to their specific subcategory. And so PPC is a great way to test how much you can accelerate that. And it's a great tool for accelerating unit sales velocity, assuming that matters, which a lot of times it does. it can produce sales. There's a secondary benefit is that it also produces search sales. So it's not the same as you've got a cost, right? Advertising cost of sale, ad spend relative to your ad sales, right? So that's one metric. You have tacos, right? Which I always kind of argue, I kind of piss about the, it's like, okay, it's an incorrect, metric, to call it tacos, but it sounds cool. Everybody likes tacos, right? Tacos is the ad spend relative to all sales. But there's something right in the middle there, which is search sales only. So you've got ad sales, you've got search sales, and you have all the rest of the sales that are not search sales, product detail pages, what they call organic, as far as like everything else except for ad sales and not search result sales is everything else. And so we, as an industry, we're measuring ad spend against ad sales and ad spend against everything. But we're missing that sweet spot in the middle, which is, what about the search sales? What about ad spend related to search sales? Ad spend can create not only ad sales, but also search sales. And as long as you are targeting products and search terms that have a good net profit margin, they've got a conversion rate that is above average for their product category, which you can see in Seller Central, and if you've got brand analytics, and you are optimizing your listings and your advertising on specific search terms where you excel as far as conversion rate and conversion rate on the search terms, then yes, in fact, it's going to have the additional benefits. The metric that we call ad spend to ad sales plus search sales, we call it Eco SaaS. One of our customers called it Eco Sauce, and I realized like, oh, that sounds close enough to taco sauce.
Taco sauce.
Taco sauce. So we call it taco sauce, and that's ad sales plus search sales, which is not the same as tacos, which is global sales, right, for the brand. But there's that huge sweet spot in the middle that we've definitely been able to demonstrate a massive jump with huge ROI. With like essentially like a ROAS of like 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes higher than that, which is a lot better performing than just advertising by itself. And so PPC is a tool. It's a lever that you can pull among many things, but it's not the only one. It's not a magic bullet. It's not the one solve, but it absolutely is one of the more important levers that you can pull. But you do have to have the other items optimized to the best of your knowledge. Whether you have advanced intelligence from somebody like DeepM, right, as far as like what to tweak about every little thing, that's one thing. But you can still try to make some kind of effort to optimize your product listings for conversion rate and relevance to the search terms that you're going after. You can advertise and you can go after search terms that are highly relevant and have an above average conversion rate for your product. And then your overall conversion rate is going to improve, and that's going to support good advertising ROI. And that's where the PPC actually becomes a welcome lever to pull, not a pain that you're trying to avoid.
That makes sense. I have one more, because this is we're going long on time, but last one. Okay, this is something that I've been theorizing, and I've been waiting to find somebody who has this answer, and I think you might have the answer. There's something that is I've never at least heard it being said, but I think that the algorithm favors you for being FBA versus FBM just by nature of you being FBA, not because people will convert better because they get 2-day shipping and they're getting, their Prime membership is being activated or whatever, but just the fact that you are engaging with that system, they will want to push you out because they have now your stock sitting in their warehouse and they want to get it out to make space for the next guy. Is that true?
Yes, for specific reasons. So what we commonly see in the Amazon community, and I've done the same thing. So I'm not one to say that, that I'm somehow better, because I've done the same tactics. And that is, I discover something, or I have a theory, and I come out and say, this is the way it is. And people go like, yeah, that sounds reasonable, so it must be true. But what we've definitely learned from the data is that it's true in whatever 5, 10, 15% weight that it matters to A9, right? Ultimately, you can't just do one thing and really beat your competition. You've got to do at least 2 or 3 things well in order to beat your competition who is not optimizing well. So it really depends on how competitive a niche and how aggressive is everybody in your niche doing a job as far as optimizing for everything, including FBM versus FBA. The biggest reason on that is something that has come up. Every year somebody talks about oh, we've got this magical discovery as far as geo ranking. It's like, yeah, okay, geo ranking exists, yes. It is hard to maintain a tracking system that can check multiple zip codes multiple times a day from multiple locations, so that we can verify that, yes, in fact, the ranking changes depending on location. But the general assumption here is, and I think it's a reasonable one, is that if your stock is not immediately available to that local customer, in other words, the distance from the local customer to an FBA warehouse, I've got, within 5 miles, I have 2 major Amazon warehouses and a Walmart warehouse. So I can get stuff 2 hours from now if I wanted to, in a lot of cases, because it's that close. It's that friendly to me. And the things that pop up in my search results are the things that I can get instant gratification on. I can get it today. That's going to come up high up on the search rank. If my product it runs out of stock on my local, if the product I'm trying to purchase runs out of stock at my local warehouse, but there's another one that is, 3 days away, then yes, I can still get it, but it's not going to show up on page 1 in my search results. It's going to show up on page 2, page 3, right? Because it's going to take longer. FBM, usually the problem with that, they bounced around a number of times with the 2-day Prime FBM shipping, where if you have a 7-day operation warehouse that can ship out right away and get that customer the product in their hands within 2 business days, then you can qualify for that kind of like that Prime badge. At which point, then you're back in the graces of A9 when it comes to search rank, based off of geo ranking and proximity of customer to actual product. And so that's usually the disadvantage to FBM, or fulfillment from your own warehouse, is how quickly and on what days can you get it to the customer may affect your ability to rank well in search results. Now, I happen to know that when it comes to FBA versus FBM, when it comes as a ranking factor, FBA versus FBM usually comes in the 10 to 15 range. Remember how I said we've got 30 different ranking factors? You got the top 5, which probably dominate 80% of the impact, and you got to get those right. FBA versus FBM usually ranks about 10 to 15 among priority. So maybe it has a 2 to 3% impact on ranking in reality, and for most categories.
Okay.
So yes, it does have an effect.
Yes, but not that.
Amazon doesn't really care that much.
Yeah. Cool.
So it's just one more thing, though, is that if everybody else if all your competition has everything dialed in exactly the way you do, and you're able to gain an additional 2% by tweaking one thing or another, including FBA versus FBM, then you may win. You may jump ahead of a whole group of competitors because everybody's sitting right at about the same optimization for the top ranking factors. And you do the one thing that puts you slightly above everybody else. So
amazing.
It can make or break, a brand and a product sales, but you'd have to be in a pretty competitive niche for it to really be needed.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate all the insights.
Of course.
Lots of nuggets of gold and all that.
Yeah, I appreciate you giving the opportunity to kind of like, to monologue for so much on this. But as you can tell, it's like I'm excited about this stuff. I really do have a lot of fun with it, and I love discovering new things, every month. So yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it.
I'm excited for the. I don't know if you're gonna open it to the public or not, but I'm excited to see it in one way or another.
Well, we do know that we certainly need the support and the testing through our paid beta testing program that we have right now. If it goes into production, we'll definitely certainly grandfather those who have helped us out, proving the system out. But yeah, we'll decide as far as whether it becomes full release, SaaS, or whether or not we keep it in house, or have it privatized, if you will.
Cool. I appreciate it again. Have a
Awesome.
great rest of your day. Thanks for everybody for watching.
Thanks, Pasha.
Have a good one.